my name's Marybeth Koon. I know some of you. And my colleague Marty Golia and I are here from the Teaching and Learning Services office over in the Wallace Library. We're giving a power workshop today on the gradebook in myCourses. We are also going to be here for a bit of time after the 30-minute session in case there are specific questions you have. You want to sit down with one of us one-to-one, because the gradebook is a fairly multi-layered tool, and I know a lot of folks come to us for help with it. So in 30 minutes, I can only provide you with the basics, but hopefully that will even clarify things for you. And then above and beyond that, we're here to answer questions. So I just want to point out my contact information, my email and Marty's email. And just one other thing to note, we love visitors. We love when faculty come visit us. So if you have a need, a technology training need, like if you want to learn something about myCourses, you're trying to figure something out and you just can't, contact us. This is our consult website. That's typically a great way to get through to us because you can submit a one-to-one request and one of us will follow up with you and set up a convenient time. We also can at times come see you, come to your location. So we do make house visits. If say you have a meeting right after when you're meeting with us, you can see if we can come to your office instead of having to walk over to us. So we recognize the distance. So we try to, coordinate that a bit. So hopefully after today, we'll be hearing from some of you. Some of you here in the audience and some of you out there watching in the video. Yes?
I'm Mindy Hopper, and just a quick comment for the link. It's very helpful for you to click the link and have access really easily to message back and forth while trying to figure out the problem and troubleshooting for myCourses. So I found that that's been very helpful. I use it all the time. It's been really great.
Thanks, Mindy. I'm going to walk through some of the essentials of the gradebook, and then we're going to jump in and do a couple of things in the gradebook and setting things up. And hello to some of you that have just walked in. So there are some essentials to the gradebook. When you go into the gradebook initially, there's a lot of different links and sections, and it can get visually overwhelming. So I want to really zero down into the essential things that, starting off, you really want to just focus on. I'm going to kind of walk you through this, and then maybe you can ask your questions towards the end. And then again, for those of you that came in, I will be here, Marty will be here, my colleague, till about noon in case you do have questions that you'd like to talk further with us on. So just to give you the basics, the main things that you want to be concerned about in the myCourses gradebook is two components, categories and items. These are the things that you as the instructor are going to create in myCourses to reflect your gradebook or your grading. Categories over here are essentially just a way for you to organize or group various assignments that you're going to be entering a grade for. What it also does, depending on the type of gradebook type you're going to be using, which I'll mention in a minute, it also assists with some of those calculations. But just consider it, for this moment, it's just sort of a folder, pretty much. And they're not necessarily required. It's optional, depending on what you want to do and how you want things to look. On the other hand, items are indeed the grade thing that you are going to set up to enter the grades, to enter an actual number so that you can have a record of what students are seeing and they can kind of see their progress too. So the items are pretty much the main thing that you definitely need to put in there to build the gradebook. I know sometimes the categories and items get confusing and someone might create a category thinking it's the item, but it's not. It's just this kind of folder which isn't really doing anything. So just wanted to clarify those things. So there are the most common types of grade options you have in the gradebook are you can set up a weighted grading system, which is essentially, I think this is the most common that I've encountered with faculty, where everything is a certain percentage of the final grade. So it all equals out to 100%. So that's the most common one folks use. Every assignment, every quiz, every activity is a certain percentage towards the final grade. The other option, the other option is points. And points are essentially, instead of a percentage, maybe you have a designated total number of points students need to achieve for their final grade. And each of those items represent a certain number of points. So very similar in that it's just you're divvying up the value for each of those items towards the final grade. So I wanted to start off with some examples of gradebooks to just visually get orientated to how the structure looks. And then we can dive in and maybe create a couple of things together. So here's an example of an instructor's in their syllabus, a component of how they have things broken down in their syllabus. I often see this is a common visual I see in a gradebook, amongst other information about their grading policy and requirements. But here they have each item, so each of these things is an item, and they represent how much weight they contribute towards the final grade. So we're going to just take that and compare it to now what it would look like in the gradebook once it's set up. So here we've created each of the items to correspond to what was in the syllabus. And then in the process of me setting these items up, there are a couple of things that I need to tell myCourses while I'm setting it up. The two main things are how many points. So essentially what this means is if I'm using then this is a weighted grading example. Points means is when you're actually sitting down and grading that paper or exam, how many points does each item or question have? What does it total to? What are you grading that specific thing out of? A lot of times it's out of 100. So you would put 100 points. The weight is its actual weight towards the final. So that's where you would put in the percentage. So these are the two most important columns when you're creating a grade item. So in this case, in this example, this instructor didn't use any categories. She just put an item in for each activity. Each activity she plugged in the weight, and now over time, as she's putting in the grades for the students, myCourses will figure out what that 10% is of that item and plop it over to the final grade. And it will kind of keep an ongoing calculation as things are being entered. There's a lot of different settings in the gradebook. And what I find that's most helpful is if you start with just setting up your items, it's a lot easier then to think through some of the other options that you have. If say, you're trying to figure out how do I want this to look for me as I'm grading things, or how do I want it to look for students? Most of the time, the default settings faculty are fine with, but there are some customizations that you can make and ways that you can preview what students see as well. So here's another example of another gradebook. This person has quite an extensive gradebook. And in this case, he actually has created categories. So anytime you see this gray bar with an item that you've created, this is a category. So he created attendance and participation, critical commentaries, and theoretical framework. Those are his 3 categories. So what he's decided is, within this realm of activity called critical commentaries, students are going to have several items that they're going to need to work on. So what he did is he created the critical commentaries category and then set up each of those individual items graded items. And so he's grouped it this so that not only visually he can kind of see how things are broken down, but also by creating this category and putting those items in the category, again, we'll walk through that process, he can decide, well, once these items are inside this critical commenting category, how do I want their weight or their value to be distributed within that group? So one common way is you can have the system distribute the weight evenly automatic for each item. So it just divvies up. So in his case, you can see, for instance, let's see, oh yeah, so critical commentaries here, he's decided I have 5 critical commentaries and they're all pretty much the same weight. They're all pretty much a similar type of exercise. They all have the same value. So each time they do it, they all will contribute 20% to this ultimate category. So it kind of lets you further break down the value of an item, what it contributes to the category as a whole, and then in turn, what gets sent to that final grade calculation. So it's sort of like an extra little bit of calculation it's doing for you to divvy up the points or the weight. So when you first go into the grade book, if you've never used it before, you come into your course. On the nav bar, you should see this grades link here. And this is what you're going to see. It's kind of like this grade setup wizard. What do I do here? So this is one of 4 areas of the grade book. So again, here's where we get, it's kind of visually very busy. And I sympathize with faculty because I meet with them all the time on the grade book. And it's kind of like, where do I start? So what I typically recommend is not to start here. The setup wizard is sort of like, walks you through and asks you all these different questions about your grade book. What I've been finding is 95% of the time as I walk through faculty with this, the defaults seem to be what they're looking for. Or they're like, I don't know, you know? So what I usually recommend is start at Manage Grades. Click on this link. Each of these blue links at the top are different sections of the gradebook that you can enter and set up. Manage Grades is actually where you're going to build the gradebook, where you can add your categories, add items, and then manage those, edit those over time. So we're going to walk through an example. So here's a scenario of I have written assignments for a course. They contribute 40% to the grade. I'm going to have in total 5 assignments. So I think I'm going to make a category called written assignments and put all 5 assignments in that category. Likewise, my tests are 60% of the final grade, and I'm having 2 tests total. So it's kind of a simple gradebook breakdown, but we'll just walk through and set these up. All right, so I've logged into myCourses. I've gone over to my grades link, and I've clicked on Manage Grades. And when I initially come in here, this is all I will see. It automatically has a final grade item because it's set up to calculate that for you. So I'm going to set up my written assignments. What I'll do is I go to New, and I'm going to make a category. And I'll call it Written Assignments. The 3 main things that I want to focus on, again, because there's a lot of different options that you really don't need to focus on right away. I want to put the name I want to then tell it what's the weight of this category. So here's where I'd put in that 40%. And underneath this, here's where it wants to know how you want to calculate those items that are in that category. A common one, again, depending on how it varies from faculty to faculty. Distribute weight evenly across all items. It will just know how to split up that weight evenly, automatically, divvy it up evenly amongst all of those items. You'll notice that in that case, if say you have the option of the students being able to drop the lowest grade, that's why these extra little fields are here. So that after you've entered all the grades for in a category for each of those items, you tell it, okay, now go ahead and just drop the lowest one, and then it will just automatically just wipe that from the grade book. Some other options are you can just manually assign the weights. If, say, one item is really more difficult or more challenging than another, you can divvy up the weights manually yourself, or you can distribute the weight in court relative to the number of points each of those items have. In this example, we'll do distribute weight evenly. So I've did my category name, my weight, and how I want it to calculate. And here, because I have two categories, I'm going to just say save and new. And then I can go ahead and create my next one, which is tests. Again, this is 60%. So I'm going to put in 60. And maybe in this case, well, you know, I think the final's going to have a little bit more weight than the task 2, because it's cumulative, is going to have a little bit more weight than the second one. So I'm going to split up and manually assign the weights for items in this category. I'm going to save and close, since this is the only two categories.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Can you go back to the first picture?
In here?
And down. We have the three options for distribution. Can you choose and click the one that says by points and do the add drop to?
Add drop to, oh, the drop the lowest points? Drop the lowest, no. It's only for the one where it's distributed evenly. Yeah. There's probably, yeah, I mean, and that's a thing where there might be a way to do that. It would just be a matter of, you know, thinking through of the best way to set it up. So if, say, you did have everything in relation to points, you know, you could probably, you know, I think what might work is just then manually go in and wipe out the grade for that, clear the grade for the one that has the lowest points. And it basically is going to ignore it. But it won't automatically do it for you.
Right, okay, thank you. That's what we do.
Okay. So now that I have my categories, here they are, I'm going to go ahead and create my item. And let me just backtrack a second. Okay, I'm going to start over because I skipped a step. I apologize. So we're going to go to New Item. And what you're presented with are all of these different options. Numeric is if you are looking to calculate an actual numerical grade, you would use that. But there are other options in here where you can make a text-based sort of grade. So it's like just feedback. It's just a feedback way with you and your students. There's a formula grade item where you can customize and calculate your grade item yourself. So there's some customization in there that you can pursue if you want. But we're going to select numeric. And this will be I'm going to do assignment 1. Oops. And here's where I decide, I scroll down just a little bit, I got my name, category, this is where I'm going to say it belongs in the written assignment category. And then if I scroll down a little further, again, here's where I say how many points, like what am I grading this out of? So maybe it's in the written assignment, there are 5 points they can get total. I might just, I could say 5 points. Maybe there are 5 criteria they have to meet in the written assignment, so 5 points for each. Or 100, however you're grading that specific thing. Notice, though, the weight is grayed out because it already knows it's in this category, and it knows that it's going to divvy up the weights itself. So I'm going to go to Save and New at the bottom. Again, I'll hit Numeric. And a lot of the work is up front to just build it. And then you can copy over existing gradebooks and edit those if that's an easier workflow. So there are ways where really the building is always the most time-consuming thing. And then once you have the structure, you're able to edit it. So I put in my name. This is also worth 5 points. And what I forgot to do is assign it to a category. So let me go back up here a minute. Here's my name. For the category, I'm going to put it into written assignment. Once I put it in that category, again, the weight is grayed out. It's already knowing how to divvy up the weight. So assignment 2 gets 50, assignment 1 gets 50. So because it's just going to, as I'm adding things in, it's going to continue to distribute that evenly. So I'm just going to set up the 2 written assignments because we're close to our time. I want to do the test one. So here are my assignments that I've just created, the max points that I've provided it, and the weights. So now let's just make a test item. Here's the name. The test is going to be out of 100 points. And for this particular test, each tests are weighted differently, I've decided. This one will be worth 40%. And then I'm going to say Save and New. Oh, very good. Thank you. Let me see if I can backtrack a sec. Thank you very much. Test. And notice it doesn't gray out the weight in this case because I already told it for this category I want it to manually be able to distribute those weights. So 100 points, and then this will be 60. And we'll do the second one. Oh, and the name needs to be re-entered because I had backtracked. I guess it cleaned everything out. Okay. I must have already created it. Well, we'll just do that. And I'm going to create test 2. And I think I might have created an extra one in this process. We'll see when we go back. That'll be good so we can see how to delete things. So test 2, my category, my points, and I think this will be 60% of that test category. So I was able to manually distribute the weights. So in this case, see how I actually, by mistake, I have an extra one in here. So if I need to delete anything, this is where I would go to manage grades. Up at the top here, next to where you add items, there's a More Actions. This is where you can find your delete option. They kind of hide it because they're trying to, sort of be, I guess, helpful in the way that, you won't accidentally delete anything. But you'll just go through this delete, and then here's where you can delete extra items that you don't need. So here's my grade book. I've got my categories and I have a few items set up. One other thing that I'll mention is, well, where do I go now to enter grades once I've set this up? And you would in fact go to the section called Enter Grades. If I click on here, what I would see, now this is a demo course, so I just have 2 people in here, but what I would see is my student class list, and then in sort of this spreadsheet view, my items in the categories. I can keep it to spreadsheet view here, or if I click on this, or I could make it so that it's just these open boxes. I can just enter in the number. So I come in here and I can just enter numbers for each student. The other way to grade things is I can go up to the column and you'll see these arrows, downward facing arrows. Just click on the one that corresponds to the assignment you want to grade, and I can say grade all. And then here's where I can, from a list of all my students, enter in their numerical grade, but I can also provide them private feedback that they'll also see. So it gives me an extra little option if I just go into that grade item itself. If, say, all of my students happen to get the same score, I could select all and then say grade up here. And then just put in the grade, and it will shoot that grade out to everybody. And I need to save and close my items. So I'm going to stop there.